What up? It's Casper. Today's video, I'm talking about second season, episode 2 of Tulsa King. The second episode of Tulsa King, the name is Kansas City Blues, directed by Craig Zisk. So Craig Zisk is back for the second episode. Second episode is 44 minutes. Cool to see the same director back for the second episode. But with that being said as well, we can also point out some things from the same director that in this episode did not expect to actually be presented at all. Tulsa King is literally my favorite show right now. There's a lot of good shows coming out and they're very interesting, and the dialogue in a lot of those shows are standing out a lot. But Tulsa King right now is definitely my vibe, especially with the mafia stuff and all the secret stuff that go behind the scenes. And then there's basically a lot of personalities involved with Tulsa King that makes this show very interesting as well. And you got Stallone over here holding it down, charismatic attitude, and his demeanor and the way he presents these lines make this whole adventure of Tulsa King what it is, and very adventurous. So with this episode was a shocker in my opinion. It was a shocker because a lot of these episodes, especially from the first season, every episode I was very in tune, caught my attention right away. And in this episode right here, there was a lot of things after watching it where I'm like, wow, you know, I can't believe this feeling is actually here with this Tulsa King vibe. And what I mean about this feeling is more of like, was I kind of disappointed in this episode a little bit. Episode right here, still seeing Dwight get adjusted to trying to grow his tree business. He's trying to definitely keep his weed business growing. He's investing a lot of time into people who actually are good at scams. So in this episode, we see Dwight Manfredi talk to someone he met in prison that literally scammed the government of millions of dollars. And the way that person in jail scammed the government, now Stallone, aka Manfredi, wants to do the same thing to basically enhance and keep his moves behind the scenes progressing and become way stronger. Definitely seen Stallone stand out as Dwight Manfredi. We also see in this episode as well that the bosses from Kansas City, the mobsters from over there, are recognizing how much of attention Dwight is getting. So that's becoming a concern to them. A lot of those mafia new villains are being more introduced, and we're getting more introduced to their feelings of basically how they feel about Manfredi. Not only that, in this episode we see Dwight and we see Tyson go into the bank and try to get a loan so they could put money down for their projects and their plans that they have. A lot of those scenarios that I explained in this episode were great. Dialogue for those specific subjects and those scenes were awesome. Dwight and Jay Will on point as well. I really like the growth of seeing Tyson in this episode because now we're seeing Tyson step into a lot of boss perspectives and being able to have Stallone with him and basically handle these interactions with people, even though they're kind of grimy and trying to scheme on these people, like going into the bank. I thought the bank scene in this episode was a very fun one, and it was a very interesting one because they both approached the bank. They're in the last season too, so that was dope as well that there's the same characters who work at the bank are still in this episode. But really cool to see from then to now that Tyson's character is now more confident in himself. The approach and going into the bank, I thought it was very hilarious how they straight up just asked for a loan, and this is a very small bank. Even though it looks nice, they can't give out loans like this, but the fact that Dwight and Tyson are asking for a loan, I thought the dialogue, the connection, the actor acting, especially with the bankers, were really good. Manfredi took over as well and still said, hey, we're not gonna leave this bank unless we get this loan. Shout out to the writing as well, because the writing made all those scenes feel very full and very realistic. In this episode, I did like seeing more of the Kansas City mobsters get more of their perspective and how they feel towards Manfredi. Their mind is very interrupted by Manfredi making these plans in Tulsa. Tulsa is becoming one of those hot spots now because Manfredi is rising in the ranks and doing it at a very fast pace. So the villains, once again, played by Neil McDonough, who plays Kyle Thresher. He has minimal lines in here, but very straight to the point, and you can definitely tell with his screen time that they're planning stuff for Manfredi. The writing is great, and you can see how slimy and how they maneuver like a snake, especially with the villains in this episode. You could definitely tell that's all personal gain. Good interaction with the bad villains in this episode, which was holding this episode down. Anticipation for knowing what are these people gonna do to Manfredi is very real right now. And you also see as well the character Bill, he gets involved in here as well, and his positioning as a character is starting to rise a little bit more. Bill is getting involved with Chicky as well, Bill has to now tell Chicky what to do, and Chicky is trying to become more of a stronger boss by knowing what Bill wants to happen, especially to Dwight. So now the confrontation between Chicky and Bill becomes one of those things like, oh dang, I can't believe Chicky really let Manfredi go to Tulsa without checking in with Bill. A lot of lines in here where you're like, hey, you can't really make a lot of moves because there is higher ups above you as much as you think you are a boss. So Chicky is in a hot seat, but he has a very high ego. Dealing with Bill, Chicky's only trying to gain more popularity and more of a stronger status by hearing Bill out and basically just trying to come up off of what Bill is trying to do to Manfredi. That's another side of this episode that I really enjoyed, just seeing the corruption just build up more and more. Good placement as well throughout this episode. One thing I did notice in this episode as well, we've seen a lot of people on Dwight Manfredi's side kind of turn on him. A lot of the mannerisms from a lot of these characters who are actually helping Manfredi is becoming a little bit dull. Not dull acting, but dull like, what am I even doing here? Like they want to gain personal gain as well. Not gonna spoil it, but we've seen now a couple characters in this episode about to turn their back on Manfredi. We do see people in Manfredi's life come in this episode as well. I think his sister shows up, tries to stay with Manfredi for a couple days. Stacy is not in this episode, so Stacy from the first episode definitely, I would say, got her feelings hurt and she's still in that shock. There's a scene in here that kind of disappointed me as well. There's two parts to this. There's a character named Jelly Roll in this episode, and I feel bad because I don't really know I'm not really familiar with any of his music. Just to find out he is a musician, but I'm not familiar with any of his work. I haven't heard any songs from him. I don't want to put down his acting because I think his acting, you know, he did have fun and he knew who he was acting with, so you can definitely see that vibe. But I think the placement in general was kind of corny and kind of cheesy. I think his solo singing section in this episode was something that was kind of off. Not only that, the camera direction as well. From the first episode, I was mentioning that there were some moments in the episode that kind of looked like behind the scenes, but more and more watching, especially with this director and his camera quality, I don't know what it was, but it even got to a point where it felt like you were watching like a Lifetime episode. A lot of the actors in the background who were acting as extras, very bad facial placements. It looked very corny, and I wish we could see more normal activity happening in the background because the camera caught a lot of people just standing still. For me, that was the only part that I felt like was a little cheesy. Hopefully this episode is like their Air episode where we won't see this happen again, and now we get back to the action, the mobster life, the crime, the crazy kills as well. So hopefully this episode they put it in the beginning of the season just so that we can kind of forget it. And also in this episode, some of the music, like the music score in the background, was kind of questionable. I feel like they could have gone a little bit more hardcore western on just making it the anticipation and the blood rushing feel more real. It was like an up and down episode for me, and I was very shocked to feel like that after watching it. So let's see how it goes on the third episode. After my watching the second season, episode 2 of Tulsa King, Kansas City Blues, out of 10, I'm gonna have to give this episode a 7 out of 10. So that's my review for the second episode of Tulsa King season 2. Shout out to you guys for tuning into the video. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace, y'all.